All right, so what do we have today? I've wanted to do this for a long time since I bought this material to do stuff with the house. Made a shed out of some stuff, put another type of this material on the front of the house, big 12-inch boards. So what are you looking at here? You're looking at a stave drum set made out of, I'll give you a close-up of this stuff in a minute, made out of siding material. Now, if you remember in the snare drum videos, one of the snare drums was this big 10-pound, 13-ounce guy right here, made of the siding material. It's double thickness, so it's almost an inch thick. So what did I do? Well, the same color that the house is painted. Is what I painted the drums. It comes primed, it's got a primer coat on it, and I painted it the same color as the house. It's dark green, which happens to be my favorite color. 6 by 10, 8 by 12, 10 by 14. All in snare baskets, modified. And a 14 by 20 bass drum. And this time, even though I painted the rods bronze, most of it's covered up with the dowels that I like to use. I'm rearranging my drum set. I'm going to shift the sizes of the drums around. So rather than set this up in another room like the last video, I said, now I'll just set it up with everything out of the way because I'm rearranging it anyway. So, a 5-piece kit. Now, the two materials, you're probably too far away from the camera, so I'll have to come in close. Do a little bit of editing here, but if you can tell, two different materials. The faux wood grain is pressed into this material. When I got these drums painted, I put some stain on the hoops and the dowels. And I had these things all constructed. I said, wow, this is a pretty nice looking set of drums. Now, the staves, once again, flat on the inside, flat on the outside. And obviously no rounding here. I need the outside look. All right, so bearing edges. I can seat the heads. I'll give you that. I can seat the heads. But this stuff with all these bumps on it, you can't get it's all different dimensions out. Not by much, it's all 7/16 of an inch thick. But with all those bumps in there, the roller on the router bit is going in and out and in and out. So the bearing edge is in some places thinner or thicker than other spots. The bearing edges are not, these drums sound incredible to me. Just as much sustain as any other drums I've ever made. The heads seat correctly. Single ply clear heads, they're not even the same heads. We have, what do we got? These are a no-name head that I got, and these are Evans, and these are attack heads, single ply clear. They're all single ply clear, top and bottom. And then I've got a Remo, one of those heads that has muffling in it, and then the outside is an Evans calfskin, faux calfskin. Coated head here, attack coated head here. So the tom heads and the bass drum, oops, sorry about that. The bass drum has a lot of punch, a lot of clout, 20-inch bass drum, 14 by 20, and single tension system. I call it a dual tension. Some people say dual tension is 2 lugs. Single tension to me reminds me of concert toms. So it's a single dual tension, which is confusing. All right, but you know the rig here. If you've seen me doing this for years now, just tighten my top nut here, and bottom head tightens into a T-nut in the bottom hoop. both heads tension at the same time. Great sustain on the drums. Great tone on the drums. They're not round. They're doing this all the way around. And if you look at the heads, like I showed you in the last video, or in the video with the snare drum, the last snare drum video, where I left the Purple Heart and the Padauk just squared, flat edged, you can see the places where, and bear, I don't think I mentioned this the last time, I want to mention it now. When you have a drum with squared edges, flat staves, what's happening? The distance between here to the flat and here is different. You're doing this all the way around. So every point, every joint is actually further out than the flat side. It's not much, obviously, but nor is it the same distance. If I go from point to point, the width of my shell is different than if I go from flat side to flat side. Not by much, hardly anything at all, but my point is, the shells are not perfectly round. I painted the inside as well, probably can't see that. I painted the inside. Let me give you a close-up of the material so that you get a better idea what's going on here. Okay, so two different types of siding material, right? 3/8, 7/16 thickness. This material is the OSB. Some people call it wafer board because it's just like tons of wafers and strands of OSB, means oriented strand board. It comes in 4x8 sheets. You may be familiar with it. If you look closely, you can see the imprint of the hydraulic presses, the wheels that go over this, and put the faux wood impression. This is a fibrous material, a compressed fiber material. It's not even wood. It's like, it's wood, it's fibrous material, but they really glue and compress the heck out of this stuff. And once again, you can see the wood grain pressed into it when they do it, and they get fake knots and the whole thing. It looks pretty cool. Okay, and you can see once again, if you look close, the roller marks on this. It's like a very tiny grid pattern as they roll it out. This is a section. I just took some extra pieces I had left over. One is painted, the others aren't. So you take a look at this, and I glued them together like as you would a stave drum. You take a look at what this is now. These indentations, these strips here, this is to give you the idea of different widths of wood within the 4x8 piece. All right, so they press all that different stuff in there. The bearing edge. Now the inside bearing edge, 45, double 45. The inside bearing edge is not bad on this. On the snare drum, it was terrible because I had it, I had it back to back. Okay, so the roller bit's going in and out on all the bumps, right? So the inside bearing edge, the 45 on this material is okay on both of them. The OSB and this fiberboard, whatever this stuff is. When you go to do the outside edge, you've got to have a roller bit going on all those indentations created by the faux wood grain, right? And it's like weathered wood. It's to look like old weathered wood. So when you look at that bearing edge, it's not even. Now in this particular case, for this one little piece I just did, I actually got a pretty decent point here. The apex of the two angles is really not that bad. On the toms, there's some areas where there's a little bit more flat because of the way that bit went into the wood. All this stuff is basically the same, but it's not all exactly the same. So, I mean, that's it. You glue the staves together. In this case, they're 7/16. Not a really heavy material. Two of them together, though. The snare drum's heavy, all right? Listen. Hear that? Different than this. And even this is rough, so you're going to get a little bit of that rough sound. But this, that's the ribs of the faux wood rubbing together. There's no way you can put a perfect bearing edge on this as people think of a perfect bearing edge. Does it matter? No. Why? Because as long as I can seat the heads, I'm good, right? So look, 5-piece drum set here, and if I didn't tell you what this stuff was, how would you know? You would think that they were Keller shells or a drum set made by any company at all. And whatever heads I chose and whatever tensions and tuning that I used. Snares are rattling. But you wouldn't know, so I show you the drums like, huh? So all the super hype and the ultra hype that's out there in this industry that says everything has to be perfect, we go for perfection. Perfect round shells. Perfectly compressed shells, perfect bearing edges. Well, no. And so I think I mentioned this too. If not, I'll mention it again because it bears repeating. The bass drum is not round. And it's not round because when I put all the staves together, one of my band clamps failed. If you don't know what a band clamp is, you turn the screw and it pulls the clamp, it pulls the band together, right? The more I tightened it up, the bottom edges of the clamp failed and they went in, which pushed in like 2 or 3 of my staves. So when you look at this drum on a profile, looking straight down on the shell, it's round and then it goes, I face that to the floor. The shell's not round. Why does the drum sound good? Come on, it's not round. It's not perfectly round. Bad enough it's got square staves, you didn't round those off, but what you have is not even round. Why? You know what I'm going to say. If any of you know what Trixon drums are, drums made in Germany, 60s, 70s. They had a drum set called a Spitfire set, I think, and they had some others, and they were one of the first to come out with a rack system for the toms and stuff. The bass drum is not only not round, it's shaped like an egg on purpose. It's shaped like this. Why does it sound good? Because the heads are manufactured to sit on the drum, on the bearing edge. And the idea was to have that flattened spot, and then it comes up and goes down. And the idea was to have 2 bass drums. You could put it in front of you with 2 pedals. And one side to get a deeper sound, the other side to get a higher sound because of the shape of the head. And you can put 2 pedals on the hoop. 1 drum. Double bass on 1 drum. Way ahead of their time in that sense. But the drum sounds okay. Not only is it not round by slight imperfections, it's designed to be not round. And they still get a decent bass drum sound. And if you're not familiar with Trixon drums, look them up. Look them up. Go to the image page. And they're YouTube. They're all over. If you can find a vintage Trixon drum set, you can pay a lot of money for it. They're rare. And some people collect them. So Trixon drums proves some Trixon drums were made conical, like my trash can drums, right? If you remember that video. Batter side larger than the resonant side. Drum shaped like conical, cone shaped. They had all kinds of stuff that they got into. And the drums sound good. The drums sound just fine. All right, so this whole idea of perfection, you can think about perfection in finishes if you want. I mount my drums, as I said before, in modified snare baskets. That's my way to isolate the drums from hardware. All right, and they don't sit in real tight. You know, I can pull them out. So I deal with the isolation issue this way with modified snare baskets. And if you want to get the rims systems or whatever drum companies have for their own drums to isolate, that's if you want a really open tom sound, right? Okay, cool. What if you don't? If you're going to use really heavily manufactured muted heads, or put muting devices on the heads, gel pads, tape, whatever you put on there, because you don't like a lot of sustain, then isolation mounting is kind of moot. You can have just regular shell bracket mounting. Nothing special with the floor tom legs. Bass drum is moot because takes boom out of the bass drum. Jazz drummers like open bass drum. Keith Carlock, if he can get away with it, and the bands he plays in, he likes an open bass drum sound. Most guys like some kind of muting. I use a little bit. Nowhere near as much as others. I don't like cardboard box sounding drums. But the bass drum kind of stays out of the position. When you get into toms and sustain, some guys don't want a lot of sustain. They mute the drums heavily, so much you can barely tell tonal differences between the heads on a 4 or 5 piece set. Very heavily muted drums. All right? So there's a whole lot of, I make these videos not to throw any company under the bus, put them down. Everybody makes really gorgeous instruments, great sounding instruments in all price levels, because competition, they have to. You want to compete, you got to make good stuff at all levels, better than the next guy. But as far as sound, I have 2 different materials here. It's not even the same material. It's not like birch, like the last video, birch, maple, and poplar with a mahogany coating on it, inside and out, which are all very close density woods in a 1/4 of an inch shell. This is not even the same material. The drums sound same character, same tonal characteristics and personality. Why? The heads. The sound of a drum is the heads. The shell adds, detracts, nuances, subtleties, shell density and depth, and a good bearing edge. Those are the 3 things that will make most of the difference. And then mounting if you want a lot of sustain. But the sound of a drum is, the lion's share of the sound of a drum is the heads. That's just the way it is. As a matter of fact, you know what? Not only is that bass drum not perfectly round, I dropped this shell before I put it together, and I heard it crack. I heard one of the joints crack. And I tapped the shell, and I could hear the sound of a crack. And this is not like real wood grain, It's all one thing, as it were, all glued together. Even though it looks like boards, it's not. So I couldn't find the crack. I thought, okay, I can take apart. I can see which one is the cracked one. I couldn't take the drum apart. I couldn't pull a space at that joint. I just heard a crack. So this drum is not even totally sound. Why does it sound so good? Because drums are incredibly forgiving. They really are. And if you can seat the heads on there, you just seat the heads correctly, man. You're going to get the sound that you want. It's not rocket science. Contrary to all the stuff out there that makes you think it is. It's not. All right. So until next time, I appreciate you taking the time here. If I have the time, we'll see if I've got one more set that I want to put together differently than I have before. This will be another totally different idea. Not totally different, but unique anyway. And we'll see if I can put that together. So for now, I appreciate your time here and hope you got something out of this. We'll see you next time.